You guys didn't get to hear all the amazing stuff. You know what I'm so excited about, Cliff?
What's that?
Is that I'm on a show that I don't have to host and be running OBS and soundboarding and all this kind of crazy stuff. It's like it's almost like a vacation here with you.
Yes, well, this is a little bit simpler display than, say, your 6-year-old podcast, that sort of thing. I don't really have a soundboard ready to go, but we do have Vox is helping me out by taking notes and typing some stuff up. There is a Google document that we'll be building from that is you're seeing right there in the window, and I'm actually going to share the access to that folder to viewing access to that folder to everyone here through the chat. Let me grab that link quickly. So you're welcome to follow along in that document if you want. And we'll be building that. And we'll also be building some NPCs and putting some stats together for things. And I'll output that portfolio file and add that to the Google Drive as well. But we're not going to be sharing that out to anyone or putting it out anywhere else. The only way to get that is to be on this stream.
Yeah, that way, if you guys use these ideas that we all generate together for your runs at home, you have much greater chance of that your players did not get to sit in on the generation of your run that you're sending them on.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and post that link in the chat now. And you should be able to access that to view. Only Vox can actually type in it. Actually, I could too, but I'm going to leave most of that up to her. So, welcome, Thomas. And we'll go ahead and get started. I thought a fun way to do this might be to use the random run generator out of the core book, and Carlton for Exploding Dice has actually integrated that into the bots functionality. So I thought we might go ahead and roll that up for our initial run inspiration and see if we like what it comes up with. I'm going to see if I can't get the Discord window into the stream here.
So you say that that Carlton added a random run generator into there?
Yep. It's you type anywhere where the Exploding Dice bot is active, you type within brackets RRG. And within square brackets. And yeah, it looks like the Discord window is just coming up black, so I'm not going to bring that up here. Maybe if I click OK, it'll load. No, that doesn't look good. Sorry, I'll get rid of that. I'll just paste the text into the window here. So here goes. Random run generator. I'm typing RRG in square brackets. And the runners go to a meet in astral space for the next job. They are hired by a mega corporation for an assassination or demolition job targeting a magical object. The run gets complicated when the job requires a rare piece of equipment.
Ooh.
Okay, well,
interesting.
With the run occurring in astral space, that's really kind of problematic, I think, because most people aren't going to be able to get there. I think what we can do, though, is still incorporate that idea and maybe have the Johnson be an Astral Johnson, perhaps?
I like that.
But here, let me paste the text from that in the random run generator here.
Well, it could be... This is just, we're workshopping, right? That's the whole point of this thing. So I'm just going to be spitballing. Feel free to tell me that my idea is not a good one. But couldn't it be that there are ways for people to go into astral space, mundane people? What if they had to meet in like a meta plane or just inside of one?
That's a lot to ask for a meet, though, don't you think? I mean, it could be a memorable run.
Maybe it's a high power. This, maybe it's not good for this first little workshop thing that we do, but it makes me think, what if that spawned a multi-part run? It said something about an object that is needed, and that makes me think immediately of some sort of an object that allows them to get to a metaplanar meeting, and maybe it's like first part is they have to go and find this thing.
Oh, here's another idea too, though. For the meet, it could occur in an area where astral space and and real space is kind of thin, so you can communicate with some spirits you otherwise might not be able to.
That's true. What is that? Oh, what are those things called? I'm really bad at remembering the names of things.
Me too.
But there is it's not an Alcara, is it? It's like an area where astral space is thin, and I used it in the complex action actual play, I think more than once, but I just can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, me either off the top of my head, but astral rifts, that sounds a little extreme. I think there's something that's maybe not quite so rifty as an astral rift.
I think so. I'm actively trying to look it up while we're
yeah, I should have had more books open when I started this.
I'm on it. But while I'm looking for that, why don't you, Cliff, tell them? So part of this workshop, I guess, would be to help people, come up with tips and ideas and everything. First of all, do you frequently use random run generating tables? And if so, what do you think is the real value of this?
I have before. I don't use them completely verbatim, and a lot of times I'll just roll it up a few times if I don't like the result. So, say if I roll up astral space, I'll usually just re-roll that part of it and move on. But I have actually used it in another way once. I came up with the idea of a happening new bar that has a bartender who might be a free spirit, or he might just have some really cool visual effects, and the name of the bar is Astral Space. So I used that once.
Ooh.
I might use it as a little bit of a jumping off point, and I thought it might be fun to just pull it up for this purpose and show off.
Well, yeah, it's perfect here because I think that's what I think that is the real value of these run generating things. I think a lot of people feel like, maybe I'm speculating, but maybe a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm not going to use one of those because, that's just, where's the creativity in that and whatever. But there's a lot of creativity in that, I think, because it's like on the old Whose Line Is It Anyway show, they would inspire skits that they would do by pulling like random words out of a hat or something. Like that's kind of the same thing.
Certainly. Okay, so the meat is going to have something to do with astral space. Let's table that for now. Maybe Eric saved us with looking that up. It's Astral Shallows. Thank you. And
thanks.
Thanks for the
Eric
gray pointy thing.
Yeah, thanks for the cheer. 1 bit.
Woohoo! It's going to fall.
It's slowly falling into the cup.
It's an anti-gravity cheer. Hey, Ram Crean, welcome. Okay, so they're going to be hired by a mega corporation. That's not uncommon. And the job is assassination or demolition, targeting a magical object. I guess, can you assassinate a magical object?
I suppose. You could assassinate like a golem of some sort. That's arguably an object.
It's more vandalism, I would say, but in that context, maybe it's a magical object that's of importance to a particular person.
Right.
Shall this be something like a powerful or expensive focus, or something more unusual?
Yeah, I mean, I think a focus is the first thing that a mind would jump to. It's certainly the easiest thing to come up with rules for if you needed to do that or anything. But if it's an item that you maybe don't plan on, somehow plan on having your runners prevented from getting to keep or use in any meaningful way, you could come up with anything.
Okay, so I like Eric's suggestion of an astrolabe, maybe.
Yeah.
It could be used for some sort of maybe metaplanar navigation or opening up gates.
Yeah,
that incorporates the astral ideas. So let's write down under the target MacGuffin section that the target is an astrolabe with metaplanar properties.
I like it.
And someone wishes for this to be destroyed. So It's someone who's with a mega corporation. That's interesting. What mega corporation would like to have that destroyed?
Well,
It
I'm
sounds
really
like it's part
bad.
of a deeper, bigger plot.
Yeah, so you got to wonder why do they want it to be destroyed? These are like things that you have to keep on your list of answers to questions to get answers to as you're designing the run, right? So those are questions, right? Why do they want it destroyed, and who wants it destroyed, and why do they want it destroyed? Um, and we're talking about a mega corporation.
Okay, let's flesh out our target a little bit more first, though, before we move on. So the
Mm-hmm.
target's an
Yep.
astrolabe. So its properties are going to be that it's probably rather small physically, made of metal. Maybe looks a little bit fragile. So I guess handheld, metal, and somewhat fragile would be good things to write down about it. And it being an astrolabe, it should have some sort of a name that might be known by certain magical scholars or referenced in an ancient tome, so that maybe some of the complications involving the run might be the people who don't want it destroyed.
Yes.
Such as the Draco Foundation or the Atlantean Society, I think. I'm horrible at naming stuff. Let's go to the audience for this. Let's have names for the astrolabe.
While we're waiting for names, that's something that I am notoriously bad at is naming things. I am so bad at coming up with names. I wish I had a Twitch audience on standby all the time when I'm designing runs like this and everything. I am a frequent user of, like, my first thought when you said that was to jump to Google and say magical item names.
You know, I'm pretty sure there are a number of resources out there for random magic item names. I've used a number of them. I know something that I like to use is to have a couple of pages of just printed out names, whether fantasy-sounding names or, in some cases, Korean-sounding names. If I know there's going to be a lot of Korean characters in this adventure,
Right.
or take your pick. Just print out a couple of pages of randomly generated names and scratch some off when you pick them off the list.
Scratching them off is important if you have particularly or players with particularly good memories or that take lots of notes. So it looks like we've got some suggestions for astrolabe names, and a lot of them center around like historical figures, which is interesting. Like it could be an actual historical astrolabe.
Oh, nice.
Like Pluto's astrolabe, Da Vinci's astrolabe, Queen Elizabeth's astrolabe.
What should we go with? Do you have a favorite,
there's also the one that I like that is not named after a historical figure would be my eyes are hurting. Malakan's idea of the Eye of Mars. I don't know why that just jumps out at me. I like it.
The Eye of Mars. That does sound dramatic.
Yeah. Of the names, I like Da Vinci. So. Or the Black Disc. A Black Lodge artifact.
Let's go with the Eye of Mars. That sounds nice and fancy.
It does. And it adds extra bits of mystery. Like, why is it named the Eye of Mars? Maybe it's Greek in origin or something? Or is that Roman? Roman in origin? Ancient Roman?
I'm not sure. One would be Ares and one would be Mars.
Yeah, I always get them confused. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Okay, nice. So we've got the Eye of Mars, which is an astrolabe. It's a handheld, fragile metal object. To those who don't really know what an astrolabe looks like, imagine like kind of a three-dimensional, weird-looking compass thing. Is kind of how I'm picturing this. It might be able to kind of fold up or open, but thanks, Eric. It's Roman is what we're looking for Mars.
Yeah.
And it has magical properties that somehow will help with traveling the metaplanes, whether for navigation or actually opening up gateways. We don't know. But, ooh, Thank you for those lovely cheers. That's a bunch of them.
Yeah, but, Damien gave them to us.
Oh, it's Damien. It's like giving them to ourselves. We're cheering for ourselves. Well,
no, we'll take every bit of money from Damien.
Well, he just got a job.
Yeah,
so
I was about to say he just got a job, so he's got the cash to spend, the pennies.
I used my free Amazon Prime subscription option to subscribe to the channel, so I figured I should do that since I was advising other people to do it the other day.
which I guess now is as good a time as any, since we're talking about it, to remind people that you can throw us some cheers or bits. If you like what we're doing live, it's always it fuels us. And I know I get a lot of people asking how you do that. And if you look at the chat window, there's a little smiley face and then a weird funky looking symbol next to it, and you click on that funky looking symbol, and it prompts you for how to get bits if you don't have them and stuff like that. So that's how you can do that. Or subscribe. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, so what I like to do at certain points is jot down a few notes about what bits of information might be picked up by legwork tests, whether it's skilled data searches or checking with contacts. Kind of like when you see in adventures, there's charts for legwork, something like that. So it might be a good idea for us to come up with maybe 3 or 4 different things. I will say 2 to 3 things about the MacGuffin they might be able to. They might be able to find out if they do a little bit of legwork on it. So one thing is that it is let's see, it's an ancient artifact of Roman design.
Yes.
Can we get that down in the legwork notes there?
Yeah. So
jot down that it is an ancient Roman artifact. And let's see what else might be known of it. Maybe something about where it surfaced. Someone found it in an excavation in maybe Egypt, a Roman-occupied part of Egypt. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Egypt is right in line with Roman, and it sends potentially sends people to exotic locales.
Okay, so write down that it was recently excavated or it surfaced in Egypt. In a territory once occupied by Rome, but that's a couple things there.
And while we're talking about this, guys, part of you being here with us is not only see, the process we go through and hear some of the thought processes we have and how to design this, but also to get your input. Like we're all working together here. This is a fun little thing. So if you've got ideas for any of the steps that we're on, throw them in the chat.
It predicts where astral planes can be penetrated, Eric says. It's the proper alignment of Mars is key to most of them. That's how it gets its name. That's excellent. So, I guess a piece of legwork text that you might get from it is that it is believed to be able to predict where astral planes can be penetrated.
I like that.
I think that's 3 legwork points there. I think that last one might be the hardest piece of information to get. You have to get the most hits on your data search or contact roll.
Now, one thing that I like to think about when I'm thinking of legwork notes is definitely of the things. So obviously the idea of why we're coming with legwork notes is this is the things that your runners are going to, potentially be information they're going to be looking for while they're going on this run. And one of them some of them should serve a purpose, at least. All of them should serve some sort of purpose, whether it be whatever, but also certainly letting them know how they can find it, where they can go to get it, maybe who has it currently, stuff like that.
Hey, Bobby, do you happen to know how to scroll the document down within OBS here?
So if you're using a browser source, then you're going to have to It has to do with, I think it's in the properties. Oh. I think you're going to right click on it and it might say like something about live something. I'm stalling a little bit because I'm going to come up with...
Yeah, sorry about this. I'm just learning how to do this stuff. I imagine you guys are going to want to be able to follow along on the screen if you don't have the document open. Though I probably recommend if you're watching the stream, go ahead and access that folder that I shared the link for, and I'll share that again while we're trying to figure this out. So there's a Google Drive folder that has this brainstorming document in it that Vox is typing in.
Yeah, so let's see.
And I'm going to post that link in the chat here. There we go. Anyone who didn't see that before, that's the Google Drive link to get to that document. So if we do have trouble making it scroll, you can at least pull it up on there and follow along.
Yeah. But what you'll want to do is on the little OBS primer here, everybody, on the source on your OBS window, right click on it, and near the bottom where the properties are will be an option for interact, and it's going to pop up another window that allows you to interact with the window.
Oh, there we go. Awesome. Oh, it popped back up. There we go.
And you'll want to keep that open if you want to continue to interact with it through OBS. So.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Thank you, Bobby.
No
I'm
problem.
glad you're here.
So yeah, what do we got? Oh yeah, let's see. So we got Egyptian says was discovered. Eric's coming up with lots of great ideas here. Eric DeMage, he's the man. Discovered in a forgotten room of the Egyptian Natural Museum. They're notoriously bad for cataloging, or notorious for bad cataloging habits in real life, he says. Good. That's believable.
And there's a particular corporation that knows about the artifact and has some idea of its properties, and they're doing some work involving astral shallows and research, and if someone else were to have this, they would be able to find the shallows ahead of them and potentially get in the way of their research. Does that sound good?
Yes, and the Atlantean Foundation wants it for, quote unquote noble. Aren't they the one? Don't they do magical research?
They do, and they're all about digging up artifacts that might be awakened pre the awakening. So that would be right up their alley. So let's make the Atlantean Foundation the target of the run. They're our opposition.
Well, hear me out, because that's a great idea. But what popped into my head was, what if you're on, like there's time pressure here, right? You in a race. It's been uncovered in the Museum of Egypt there, the Egyptian National Museum, and you've got to break into the museum, and you're trying to get there before the Atlantean Foundation does.
Oh, and they're trying to get there to steal it. You're trying to get there to make sure it gets destroyed.
Exactly.
I love it. Awesome. So the target location is the Egyptian National Museum. Is that in Cairo?
I bet.
That sounds fun. So that's great. It's a big museum in Cairo. We may not use the same building directly from there, but it also might be actually easy to pull up a map for a museum in Cairo.
It's Egyptian National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. It is in Giza.
Okay. So our target location is in Giza. And it's what's the name of that museum again?
National Museum of Egyptian Civilization.
Okay.
Man, there are like lots of really cool sounding museums in Egypt.
All right, so that sounds fun. You have to break into the museum and destroy the artifact before someone else steals it, or if they steal it, then you have to get it from them or destroy it within their hands.
Yes, and I love runs when there's that where there's that pressure. Like it's not just like, oh, let's just spend a lot of. You want to do the typical, sort of sneaky breaking in and doing something. That kind of classic Shadowrun stuff. But there's some sort of pressure that puts you under a time crunch or something.
Okay, so for the legwork notes, one quick legwork note is that we're talking about the museum itself now. They have a new upcoming exhibit that has yet to be announced to the public. We can write that one down.
Yes. Yeah, so exactly. So we've come up with what the kind of the background notes are, right? Like we know what's going on, but the key is just like if you were reading through an adventure that was published or something like that, they'll have, little bits of information that'll be, easy to get, kind of hard to get, really hard to get, and they need to be like little nuggets of information that might, brush up against the truth or just be half truths or even whole truths if they do really, really well.
Yeah, so that'd be a nice, easy one for them to get. Something that might be more difficult might be, I guess, a piece of legwork they might want to get is a map of the museum, including
yes.
Some of the more restricted or less public areas. So let's put down for another legwork note a good map of the museum. Let's see, who might be providing security for the museum? That would be a useful thing to know in the legwork. That could be a security contractor.
Generic security contractor A.
I always like to pull up when I'm not just using by default, say Knight Errant or Lone Star. I like to pull up the book Market Panic.
Yes.
And at the beginning of the chapter for each corporation in Market Panic, there is a list of different subsidiaries. In some cases, it's laid out very nicely. In some cases, it's a big jumbled list, but it's pretty useful. Let's see, who might be involved in museum work in Giza? What's a
This
good
is
corporation
one of
for
my
that?
Yeah, this is one of my weaknesses actually, is knowing what the different corporations are all about.
Hey, Oz, welcome. Let's turn to our audience. Who's got an idea for what corporation might be providing, what mega corporation might be at all interested in? Oh, Petrovsky for MCT. That's our first one. Let's use it. So, Petrovsky Security, provided by MCT.
Thanks, Oz, who dropped that in.
And they basically just provide the guards and the systems for the security. We'll get in more detail for the security system soon, but that's plenty for this legwork note. So, who provides security to the museum? The note on that will be Petrovsky. Thank you. Let's see, that's a good 3 notes. Maybe something nice and juicy and specific about the museum security, like they employ a particular kind of drone, or they something that could be exploited, maybe.
Well, so it's a museum full of artifacts. Maybe an exploitation could be just the knowledge that the group, this particular branch of Petrovsky or whatever that's been contracted, one of the constraints that they have is that they can't use a lot of like, not necessarily lethal force. They can't use a lot of stuff that would cause a lot of collateral damage, right?
Oh, yes. So they won't be using things like grenades or even flashbangs, and they'll be very careful with their bullets.
Right. They'll probably use a lot of more tactical maneuvering to try to control and contain. until they can get, someone else in that can assist or for backup or something like that. But they're going to be very reluctant to cause collateral damage.
Yes, let's put down the legwork notes. The guards are under strict orders not to damage the exhibits.
Right.
And that's certainly something that can be exploited. So that's a lot of
Absolutely.
great legwork notes for that. So let's move on to the Johnson for this. Who is our Mr. Johnson or Ms. Johnson?
So what kind of mega corporations are? So this is a question for you, but also our audience. What kind of mega corporations are into magical artifacts and items? Would be doing research on this kind of, or as we said, they're not necessarily doing research. The runners are out to destroy it. So who would be interested in destroying something like this and keeping it out of others' hands?
Well, in this case, I think it's a corporate researcher who already has a pretty good idea of where to find astral shallows and doesn't want other people finding them and nosing around where they're doing the research.
So I happen to know, I guess, isn't Wuxing into astral? Not, they're not into necessarily astral stuff, aren't they? The ones that do a lot of geomancy and stuff.
Wuxing, yeah, they're mostly known for shipping. They do a lot of shipping around the world, but they do a lot of things involving geomancy. You're right; they have been involved with that. So the mega corporation that is hiring you is Wuxing, and they don't like the implications of having a device like this coming out, or worse yet, someone learning how to replicate it.
Right. And as a general note, while we're thinking about how this is done, Eric DeMage does make I think a good point that when you're dealing with magic items and stuff, pretty much any corporation is interested in magic, right? Like maybe some are less stereotypically interested than others, but I think he's right. I think you could make a good case that anyone, any of these guys would be interested in an item like this.
Sure, but to destroy it, that's something a bit different.
Well,
so, yes.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, excellent point.
So Johnson is from Wuxing, and we'll say that Johnson is actually people heavily involved in the magical research, so that'll make them an interesting character. They're not using a separate hired Johnson. They're going to show up and feel that they're perfectly capable of handling this negotiation. So our Johnson is a geomancer, which we can assume is a fairly high-grade initiate. We can write these down under who is the Johnson for Wuxing.
Yeah.
Shall our Johnson be male or female?
Let's go female.
Okay. And how about we make it extra cool and weird and make the Johnson a Naga?
Ooh, I like it.
So we have a female Naga as the Johnson.
I like it. I've never encountered a Naga in any Shadowrun I've done, so.
I haven't really either. They've popped up in some stuff I've read, but not so much actually in use. So Nagas are like sapient magical snakes who they actually pretended not to be sapient for a long time to observe metahumanity before they revealed themselves. There's some place in Asia where they're revered and basically run their own country. I forget where that is. But I imagine such an animal being would be well respected by Wuxing and could definitely be involved in some fancy magical research.
Yeah.
So the meet will take place where there is a known astral shallows, where the Johnson can travel and meet them in its astral form. Her astral form. So this might be like a weird, out-of-the-way place, kind of out in the wilderness somewhere. There's like a An old rundown building that will work for the meat. It's an old bar.
I like it.
So we're jumping down to the meat already. As far as legwork notes on the Johnson, we kind of skipped over that. If anyone does research on the Johnson, I guess the things that pop up to me that we can put under there, under those bullet points, is just that the Johnson is a high-grade initiate.
That they work for Wuxing.
For Wuxing, yes.
Yeah.
And one of the, I think the juiciest bit would be that they're involved in researching astral shallows. Any other suggestions from anyone about tidbits of information that can be dug up on our Johnson by clever or resourceful runners?
Yeah. It's always nice to, whether you use it or not, explicitly as part of the run, I feel like it's always nice to have something out there, to reward them for looking. But that all depends on whether you want to encourage that type of thing, right? There's a whole another like episode of some show that could go into what the tactics are for how to run those types of things and how to control the flow of things and whatnot. But I always find it interesting to leave those pieces of information that might get people thinking or curious or whatnot.
Okay, so a couple things on the top level before we dive into some other specifics, though, are going to be, we have a plot twist that is going to be where we need some sort of a rare item or object. I think maybe the astrolabe being a magical artifact, maybe you need something special to destroy it.
That's good. I like that.
I'm not sure what that could be offhand, but maybe that can satisfy that. And we'd also talked about the complication of having other runners being involved.
Right. That was the first twist that popped into my head, is that they aren't necessarily going to know that, like, maybe you don't want them to know right offhand that someone else is after it. I mean, it makes sense that a Johnson might not want them to know, because that might, inspire runners to have a reason to demand higher pay, right?
Right. On the other hand, if there's someone else going after it, they might want to light a fire under the runners to get them going. But
right. So
I like
all
both
things
of
that you
those
have to
ideas.
think about. Yeah.
But maybe the astrolabe needing something special to destroy it. Maybe this could be just that case where, like, say, hey, we use the random run generator. We like some of the ideas, but maybe we won't use them all. Let's just maybe toss the rare item and just use the Atlantean Foundation.
Yep.
Or
like
we can use them both. What do you all think?
And hey, Eric, thanks for the cheer.
Woo! It's a purple one.
Yeah. It's like money for the tip jar. Thanks, pal.
Awesome, thank you. It's a military grade thermite, though. I like that. It's something that's difficult to acquire, and maybe we can give them a suggestion of where they might be able to steal some if they can't otherwise acquire it through their contacts.
Yeah. One thing that this makes me think of is just personally, and different GMs have different tastes and different styles and everything, but personally, I always try to do my best not to have too many complicated moving parts if I can avoid it. Too many special
True.
little things. And I feel like having, mostly because it's not that I don't want people to have to go and do those things, but I feel like, I have to justify it somehow,
That's correct. So maybe the Johnsons strongly suggest they acquire a thermite bar and use that to destroy it, just to be sure. But you they can use whatever other means they want. It's not necessarily all that terribly difficult to destroy as long as they have access to something they can use, which most runners will. So let's keep it relatively simple and mainly focus on the Atlantean Foundation runners being the primary twist.
Yeah. We might want to talk a little bit about, for anybody who might be tuning in who's new to GMing in general, maybe what the point of a plot twist is in general. Like we take for granted, that you'd want to have a twist in there, right? But why is it that you want there to be a plot twist?
Well, it certainly makes it more interesting. You want to have something to keep the runners on their toes. You go in with, you can make some plans and have an idea about how you're going to try pulling off the run, but if you don't have some sort of strange twist come up, something to make things go wrong or make the runners think on their toes and to have to deal with something unexpected, it's a lot less exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's a simple answer, I think. It's just, it makes it more interesting. Yeah. It's actually a trick that the reason I said to explain it is it's actually a trick I'd never thought of before as a GM until well before I actually met Mr. Johnson here. I was listening to the Arcology podcast, and it's a tip that they gave on there. And I was like, that's brilliant, So I thought maybe people here who'd never heard that before might want to know that, yeah, I like to try to work some sort of a twist, something they weren't planning for, into every run,
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the group that I have of patrons, I run a game for monthly, one Friday a month. That's sort of built into the concept of their campaign, as they have this fixer named Mr. Jones, who he's a fairly new fixer. He means well, tries to do a great job, and generally works okay, but there's always some messed up twist where something goes wrong that's like completely outside of his control, but there's always something. And I try to make it a little bit extra weird and unusual and obnoxious or something.
Right. And it doesn't have to be a dramatic plot twist, although those are nice if you can pull them off. But it can be something as simple as just something they weren't expecting. There was a run that I sent the Complex Action Actual Play people on where they had to go and find someone somewhere in the city that had gone missing. And the twist that I threw in there was that she had, a revenge job that she wanted to get done, and she offered that as a second job to the people. And it's just not something they were expecting. And that's all. Something to get people thinking, throw them off their toes.
I think we can start diving into fleshing out some of the details here. One of the things I think we kind of glossed over a little bit was the meat, and we've kind of come up with some of the details as we went here. But let's go ahead and write them down and where it says the meat. The location is a place with astral shallows where the Johnson can meet in her astral form. And the location itself is a bar out in the country. Let's call it the Hitching Post. It's an old and rundown.
Any reason you came up with the Hitching Post, or that?
I guess I can picture a bar that's like kind of freestanding out in the country near where I live that's called the Hitching Post. So that just comes to mind.
Right.
And this is an old bar that is actually abandoned. No one goes there anymore. It's a kind of the place has a creepy vibe. So maybe under flavor, write down creepy vibe, background count of... there's a background. No, there's not so much a background count, but we've determined there's an astral shallows here.
Right. That could be the reason why there's a creepy vibe.
Right. Maybe it's a little foggy. Of course, it's going to be at night. So we can play up. We can play up the creepy out in nature factor of the location.
Yeah, and of course, this is almost a must. Your runners can't know the nature of the place they're meeting them when they go, right? Because it's got to be played up, and it's got to be surprising that they're meeting some sort of astral Johnson in a shallows. That's got to be.
Yeah, and type down under the challenges here, this just occurred to me. Anyone who is attending astrally will be visible to everyone.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
you have spirits that are on standby, or if you have
Or
someone
if
who's
you're,
just showing up to tag along.
yeah, like if your normal like operating procedures is to have like your mage, out in astral space doing astral overwatch and not, ever physically there, they're gonna be there, seen, you know.
Something else cool we can put about this is the Johnsons showing up in astral space. She's pretty powerful, but vulnerable there. So her bodyguards will be a spirit of each type.
Nice. See, I love this. This is actually playing nicely into something I was going to make sure to mention when we talk about these little scenes, as they're often called in the Shadowrun published adventures. These little scenes, like the meet, I always like to think of some kind of like special, cool, interesting detail that makes it memorable. And this whole picture we're painting here is perfect.
Let's say each elemental type.
Oh yeah.
So there's a fire, earth, air, and water. That just makes it easy. It doesn't reveal too much about what her tradition might be, but it reveals something. She's not a normal shaman, for example, because of the presence of a fire spirit. Probably hermetic, which makes sense with the geomancy vibe, but I think that's gonna be for that. So when they're at the hitching post, they're gonna be all nervous, and the Johnson shows up with a bunch of spirits that are astrally present. If anyone freaks out and tries to shoot or something, the bullets just pass through. I think that makes for a fun, interesting meet that could bring up all sorts of fun tension.
Yeah. Now, I don't necessarily want to jump back and forth between things that we've moved on, but I saw something really interesting in the chat that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up, because I thought it was really interesting. Is Commander Dunsell suggested a twist, which was the astrolabe cancels out combustion / rapid chemical acceleration within 20 feet of it. Now, while that's really, really specific, it does make me think, like, in general, maybe using that as inspiration for something strange and difficult and challenging that the astrolabe causes to happen around it.
So you can't use fire, but acid would work, or you can smash the thing a bunch.
Yeah, like fire would be interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's easy to justify, right? Because maybe it's because of the elemental nature of, the thing.
Yeah, so it's just you can't get it too hot.
Right.
So if you bring that thermite bar, it's not going to work. Hit it with a mini welder, that's not going to work.
Ooh, and that means you could the Johnson could even still suggest it.
Right.
And then
I love it. Oh.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the wrong thing to use. That's beautiful.
Yes.
I love that. That's a fantastic twist.
Yeah, good one, Commander Dunsale. Thanks for the suggestion.
Okay, so great. So one more thing we needed to determine about the meet is how much they're going to get paid and how that's going to work. When I think about pay for runs, you often think of, the Johnson's going to offer a certain amount, and then they get more or less based on the net hits on the opposed negotiation test. Normally, when I bring up stats for a Johnson, all I bother with is just kind of guesstimating roughly how many dice they should have in their negotiation or other social skill tests.
Now, I think this is a good point of tips to give some players, because there are a lot of things that are difficult for GMs, especially of Shadowrun. And one of them is exactly what those dice pools should be. Now, I know I have fallen into a good rule of thumb for that, but I'm interested to hear, how do you decide how many dice to give really any NPC or contact or anything like that? But I guess we're specifically talking about a Johnson and their negotiation. How would you decide? How would you make that decision, how many dice they get?
My super simple off-the-cuff answer is anybody who's reasonably good at what they do. They're not necessarily like a super specialist like a Shadowrunner, but they should be really good at something. Give them 12 dice.
Okay.
Someone like this, they're maybe not a professional Johnson. Maybe they're not as good at negotiating. They've spent more of their time on magic. Maybe I'll knock 2 off of that, so maybe they have 10 dice to negotiate against. Another way to look at it, though, is you look at the party that you're playing with. If you don't have a face in the team, then you don't really want to see them get too frustrated by the whole negotiation process.
Exactly.
If they all, sink a bunch of karma in and pool and do a good teamwork test to scrape out those 3 or 4 hits, you want them to be able to get a little something for it. So I might go with a smaller dice pool just because of that, which, that's giving up some realism for the sake of, a more narrative fun, I guess. But I've done it before.
Yeah. My rule of thumb is always a little. The way I think is always like algorithmically, right? I want to have some sort of like equation or rule I can use, and I've gone through lots of iterations of what that could be. But my rule of thumb I've fallen to is actually something that my co-host on the Six World podcast, Cassie, helped me think about, which is I always start with a dice pool of 10, and then I'll add to that based on either the connection rating of the contact. So a 10 plus connection rating might be a dice pool for everything that they are good at.
I like that.
And or if it's like mooks or grunts or something like that, it would be the same equation but plus their professional rating. So 10 plus their professional rating would be what, their combat skills. Just a really easy way to not have to think too hard about it, because you can really get bogged down by trying to stat stuff out.
Yeah, certainly. And I typically don't bother statting out anything that I don't need to. Right. It's easy enough to pull something up out of the helps and hindrances section of the core rulebook, maybe, or one of the sample characters or something. And just you've got some stats to run with, but for me, I find it so much easier, just to pull numbers out of the air. Like, it makes sense for them to have a 12 in that, so we'll go roll with that. And if it turns out you need lots of combat stats, that's where you're going to need the stat blocks. But for the Johnson, you typically don't need the stat blocks unless you think the runners are going to fight them. In which case, you have maybe the Johnson spend an edge to go first and flee, and you look up the stats for all the spirits that are going to come beat up the runners. Or something. But that, I guess, at that time the run's blown, and you've got your equivalent of a Grand Theft Auto sandbox run for the rest of the session.
If your runners did that, you should beat the crap out of them with those spirits.
Right.
To teach them a lesson, not to ruin the plans that you carefully laid.
All right. So I guess if we didn't figure out the pay for this. So a lot of times, we talked about the pay. It could be X amount of new yen plus or minus based on net hits. I normally don't bother using the formula out of the core rulebook for this because it's hard to anticipate some of the things that are going to happen. So I usually just like to come up with a number of some kind. And really that's going to vary depending on where you're at in your campaign. I don't see this as something that like a super new runner team might be entrusted with, so it's not going to be a super low paying job, and it's going to involve going to Egypt. So I think in order to make that viable for most runner teams, the Johnson is going to have to offer transportation of the runners and their equipment to and from the run, to and from Giza.
Yeah.
Unless we want to have the finding a coyote and getting it done yourself be part of it. But since we don't have an actual specific team that we're doing this run for, like, for example, if I was doing this for the actual play group, they'd be saying, get your own asses to Cairo. You've got a VTOL.
Right.
But for an open-ended run like this, where it could go for any team more or less, we have to include the travel to and from Egypt with gear under the compensation. Thanks, Vox, for putting that there. Then the money should be pretty decent. I think offering something like $25,000 a piece is probably pretty good. What do you think about that number?
I think that's a good number because this is shaping up to be a pretty exciting and high powered job. They're not just they're going to the National Museum of Egyptian history in the one to get this thing, and it's all the way in Egypt. So I think that's a good one. To just make another extra point on top of what you said about your team and their considerations and everything is if you're in the situation like you said, you would have your actual play people, they got a VTOL, they should go. But remember that it's reasonable for your runners, if they're going to be providing their own transportation, it's reasonable for them to expect compensation for providing their own transportation, so like presumably you're hiring them because they have these capabilities, so that gives them and
if you've got
reason for that.
If you've got a skilled face in the team, this is a moment for them to really shine. So take the time and role play the Johnson with them. Have a little back and forth banter on what compensation might be, and give them a little bit more of that challenge, as opposed to if you don't have a big face, you might gloss over some of the negotiation aspects and just get right to the money. So let's say 25,000 each, plus 5,000 nuyen per net hit on the negotiation test.
Yeah, I always like to cap the amount of extra they can get at like 4 hits,
sure,
4 extra hits
worth,
or something.
So we'll write down under the pay plus 5K per hit. Max is out at 45K each.
Right. Otherwise, you end up in the situation where your face pre-edged and got 13 net hits, and then they retire after they complete the run.
All right, Commander Dunsail, perhaps the client is using the team as a diversion to steal it while the team is on site. That would be an excellent one to use if our twist was the Johnson pulling off a double cross. I love that idea. Save that one for another day, I think.
Yeah, but good point. A double cross is always a good standby twist to use, right?
It's a good one to use from time to time. You can't use it too many times, or it gets really frustrating.
It's the one that keep in your back pocket if you can't think of anything else. But if all else fails, just have the Johnson double cross. But I almost feel like this is maybe again another show. But I always think, why not? Isn't it such a good idea to have a Johnson double cross the runners on the first or second run so that they're always paranoid about it?
Right. Something I like to do is come up with ways that the Johnson double crosses the runners that's not as severe as hey, trying to get them all killed or in jail.
Sure.
I did with one of my groups is they had the Johnson was a magical researcher, and she promised to make them foci after the run. And her plan was, she offered them some money and they got some pay, but it was pretty low and the job was big and annoying. But what she did at the end of the run was tried to run off and get out of the country without making the foci for them, because it would cost her time and karma to do that. They managed to keep an eye on her and sit on her and make her make those foci before she got to leave the country, and that was an interesting twist to the run. They ended up not getting screwed over, and it wasn't a situation where you had to geek the Johnson or survive, but you can have the Johnsons screw them over in ways that are subtle and maybe a little bit more nuanced than just getting stabbed in the back normally. Sure. So
fair enough, yeah.
I like to look for ways to do that, but in this case, let's assume that Johnson is more or less up front and wants the runners to succeed, and will pay them the agreed upon sum if they do pull off the run successfully. So I think we've got a good overall picture for it. Our target location is where we might need to flesh out a lot more details. What is the security system like at the museum where the object needs to be stolen? I think that's the next big thing we need to answer. And I've got some notes down for things to kind of go through when you're thinking about a security system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to paste those into the brainstorming document here.
And this is a really big thing, right? I see a lot of people asking questions about this. This is a common and frequent question we get on the Sixth World podcast, a topic of conversation that comes up on the Shadowrun subreddit all the time, how to design opposition and security in Shadowrun. And I think the reason is because Shadowrun, for good or ill, whatever your opinion about this particular thing is, Shadowrun is different than other popular systems like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, whereas those Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, there's a very clear systematic algorithmic way to give your group opposition, right, based on their level and stuff like that. But it can be challenging in Shadowrun.
All right, so let's start with the guts of it here. I've kind of broken it down to different bullet points here, like our matrix host, what the locks are like, what sensors there are, what personnel, what their magical support is, and any other details. So let's just go ahead and start with the host. We know there's going to be a host for the museum, right?
Right.
The host rating, there's a guide in the rule book, like something like 7 or 8 would be a huge, powerful corporate host. 5 or 6 is pretty strong. 3 or 4 is relatively weak. We don't want this to be a walk in the park for the runners, but not necessarily unhackable. What do you think about a host rating of 5?
A host rating 5, what I like to think about is, so when you have a host, the host rating determines the minimum of the attributes that are going to be firewall, data processing, attack, and sleaze, right? So it's
yeah, and if you take a look at the document there, I've put those down there in probably what I think the order that most people setting up a host would put it at.
Right. There are exceptions, of course, but that's a really good. The order that there is firewall, then data processing, then attack and sleaze. But what I like to think is that's the array, right? If the host rating is 5, then you're going to have 5, 6, 7, and 8 for whatever those are going to be. So the highest one is going to be 8, and then typically all their tests are going to be 8 plus the rating, which would be 5. So they're going to be on the stuff that it's good at.
I think it's all one higher than that. I think it's +1, +2, +3, +4. Am I remembering that wrong?
I think you're remembering that wrong, but either way, whichever one it is, you're looking at 13 or 14 dice to roll against your players. So consider, that's the way I like to think about it, is what the host rating should be, is consider what your matrix player and what type of dice pools they have, because you don't want it to be if you're going to make them do it, you don't want it to be impossible. So you got to consider how many dice they are rolling. Now, if you want it to be difficult, again, make it, just take that into consideration is my point.
Yeah, I think something like 13 or 14 dice, that's going to be pretty challenging for most Shadowrunner deckers or technomancers, unless they're very advanced. But it's not even a walk in the park for some of the more advanced runners. And it would be insurmountable for someone who isn't actually, really good at hacking into places.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good medium style. You're looking at ranges from 10 to 14 of
we
dice
don't want to go.
Be...
Yeah, we don't want to go too low here, because this is a place where people might want to break in and steal stuff, right?
Right.
Breaking in and stealing from the museum, that's not a new thing, or something that is unlikely to happen at any given time. So they wouldn't
especially
have a super
museum
crappy
with
host.
A bunch of magical artifacts.
Sure. So let's go with host rating 5. You can adjust it up or down if you need to. We'll put that down in the document. Host rating 5. That way the firewall would be. I was trying to look up that point here. The host array. I'm going to do that real quick. Host attributes. Yes, you were right, Bobby. It's the rating and then 1, 2, and 3. So our host will have a firewall of 8. We can put that down. A data processing of 7. An attack of 6. And a sleaze of 5.
Right.
As far as the host ice goes, you just want to kind of figure out what ice the host has to launch. To be honest, I rarely even bother with this. I just pick them if it becomes necessary.
Yeah. Now, yeah, exactly. And if you have some experience in designing or using hosts against your players, then you know that the idea is that the host has a loadout of ice and an order in which they deploy them, right? And you could get really detailed in what is the security strategy of this host. Are they trying to contain people so that they can be located and arrested, or
yeah, let's figure that this place really wants to chop the hands off of the thieves, more or less. So they're going to start out, the first ice that gets launched is something big and nasty, but not so nasty they're going to deal with corpses of people who are just mistyping their password too many times. So maybe Blaster Ice. That one does some biofeedback damage, but only stun.
Right.
It also link locks them, and then so we'll do Blaster for the first one, and then since that link locks them, the Track Ice would be the next one. That'll trace them down so they can arrest them if they get the chance, and then after that, maybe Marker will help put marks on so the Blaster can beat them up more.
Right.
And how about Killer and then Black Ice? We honestly don't need to go any farther than that, probably. You can make stuff up if you need to at that point.
Yeah, in my experience, they're not going to get too much past 3 or 4 ice being deployed before it's game over anyway, so...
So we've got a good basic host there then. Patrol intervals would be like how often they're going to check for people running silent and snooping around in the Matrix. And
there's a whole table for that based on their in data trails based on their.
I'm trying to find where that is here. Do you remember?
I've got it right here.
Is? Oh, thank you.
The page, it's in data trails, page 86, and for a host rating 5, it would be every 1d6 plus 2 combat turns.
Okay, sounds good. So they've got Patrol Ice running, looking for anyone doing anything suspicious in the host. So that means, what does that mean? I think to me, it means that if you are not doing anything illegal and you're not running silent, you probably don't have to worry about this. But if you start doing illegal actions, or if you're running silent, that's where this is going to come into play. So you better get your hacking done, get in, get out.
Right. And this is where I often try to think about what is the purpose of this organization's host. It's a museum. There are probably going to be lots of people hanging out in the host at any given time.
Now, this also only applies to within the host. This doesn't apply to anyone running silent, wandering around in the physical museum. So,
sure.
So if and when the runners do a host dive to go in and hack the place, say to find out exactly what room they need to get in to steal the artifact, or to loop the cameras, or do whatever it is their hacker is going to do, they have to worry about making a logic plus sleaze test to avoid the matrix perception test of the Patrol Ice, which I think is going to be host rating plus. I think just double the host rating, 10 dice. Every 1d6 plus 2 combat turns. And if they get spotted, it doesn't necessarily mean they're blown completely, but somebody's going to be wondering what they're doing there. And they probably are going to have to get out fast.
Right.
So I think this being a museum, there isn't a huge focus on lots of Matrix tech, so I don't think we need to do much more than that with the host, and move on to the locks. Mm-hmm. The locks are going to have, basically, what I like to think of is there's 2 kinds of locks. The cheap locks that go everywhere that lots of people use, and it's not that important if anyone breaks into them. And then there's the important locks that they really don't want anyone getting into that isn't supposed to have access. So let's go ahead and figure out what our lock ratings should be. I think basic public locks, maybe like a rating 2 or 3. So if they're breaking it at night when the museum's closed, they'll have to deal with those.
Right.
And they're simple key card locks. So under locks and lock ratings, we'll go with the cheap locks. Under 1 bullet point, will be rating 3 key card. The important locks, I think the museum would spend money on these. So I think something like rating 6 would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, places where important artifacts are being held, important exhibits are being kept behind, stuff, or, Yeah.
Those are going to require maybe a code and some sort of biometric, like a retinal scan. So let's say code plus thumbprint. And of course, the thumbprint, everyone knows, it checks for a pulse, so you can't just chop a hand off, but we don't have to put that in there.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, as you're designing the security and everything, this also can go hand in hand with what we talked about before with legwork. These are all pieces of information that you can your runners can find in the legwork portion of their of the run.
I think something else that's a good twist on this, since locks are going to be super important to a museum, Let's put a bullet point under important locks there, and give it a rating 6 anti-tamper system.
Ooh, wow, yeah, yeah. That's a beefy
So
lock.
their good locks are not only going to take a long time to pick, but they will also be setting off alarms if you don't do it right.
Right. And again, that's completely reasonable because of the nature of the target, right? Of the location. It's a museum. They have that's what they need to do, is have locks and sensors in place to keep people from ruining the source of their bottom line, their business.
One more thing I want to say about the locks is you have to decide whether or not they are accessed, whether or not they are hosted by the Matrix host, which it totally makes sense for them to be, I think, to some degree. But that also means that your hacker can lock and unlock them. So I see no reason not to have all of the locks be accessible by the Matrix. What do you think, Bobby?
I think that's fine. Another quick point to make here is, again, consider what your team. You know, if you have a Matrix person who is likely like sometimes it's really good to make that easy and possible if that's what you think is going to be the source of like something for your Matrix person to do, is what I'm saying. You know,
Yeah. On
give
the
them
other
something
hand, though,
to do.
If I knew I had a really powerful Matrix person who's just going to blow through these locks, and I want them to be something that's going to be difficult for the team to deal with, I might have the locks be offline, so you can't hack them with the Matrix. You have to physically get up to them
Yes.
and deal with them. You could hook a data tap up and then let them hack them, but you're going to have to
But
get to the lock.
that's another challenge. Exactly. Yeah.
I think having an anti-tampering system, though, that can call for an alert is going to be important to the people running the museum, though, which is going to require the lock to be on the Matrix.
Yeah. Yes. Excellent point.
So in our example, the locks are on the host. Sensors. When we think about sensors, we obviously know they're going to be cameras, but there can be all kinds of different sensors. The cameras are going to be the most common, I imagine, that will often have audio sensors with them.
There's got to be a pressure sensor so that they have to, do the Indiana Jones thing and, have a big, heavy bag of sand and switch it over.
Yeah, I like that. So there's individual sensors guarding individual objects. So if they get greedy and try to steal a bunch of stuff, then there's individual security stuff they're going to have to deal with, and their decker will get more and more angry with them as they try to steal
right.
other stuff. But so let's go into the sensors. As far as sensor ratings, that's typically going to be the limit for anyone trying to spot the runners doing their shenanigans using the sensors. So the guards that are watching from the guard shack at the cameras. So, but the sensor rating also determines how big the object that houses the sensor is going to have to be. Now, granted, you have a building, you think you can do whatever size you want, but you don't necessarily want to have a big, giant, obvious sensor array watching everything. So that's one of the factors that I use to determine what the sensor ratings are going to be. Since something like a 1 or 2 would be pretty much invisible, right? Super tiny, easy to hide in almost anything. But not the greatest resolution. Only 2 hits. That's pretty easy for most runners to stealth by, even if your guards have a good perception skill.
Now, something to consider, and maybe something that we need to think about with this museum, is that the obviousness of a sensor or a sensor array can be a deterrent, right? So it may be that they're not trying to trick people, they're trying to be maybe they're trying to be very obvious about, hey, this is under surveillance. Please don't try anything,
Right. So I don't think they're going to be all that worried about tiny sensors. So let's say wall-mounted device or a medium drone is a max sensor rating of 4. I think that's something they want to take advantage of, and a pretty solid number.
Sure.
So under sensor ratings, let's put sensor ratings 4. And that's going to be
Sounds
the general catch-all sensor rating of all the sensors in the building. We don't have to worry about any funky minutia about this one has this, that one has that, right? Mm-hmm. How thorough is the coverage and maintenance? Man, that is going to be really thorough.
Yeah. And that's you kind of touched on a general interesting point when you're designing security and everything. I've been through the phase in my GMing, and I'm done with it, where you're trying to like map out everything and say, oh, here's a doorway here. Let me put a sensor rating this here and whatnot. No. Just say, like we've done so far, outer doors, general public, this, and just categorize them so that it's much faster and easier to plan. So.
Okay, so good point. The outer doors, general public areas, those are going to have cameras with audio sensors.
Yep.
And they're going to have pretty thorough coverage. And then we've got individual sensors per item. What that means is exhibits, right? Are going to have pressure sensors, maybe motion and heat detectors.
Mm-hmm.
But those are, obviously you can't have those running in the areas where everyone's wandering around. Those are in the more protected zones. The other thing we want to keep in mind for the sensors is what is the typical dice pool for anyone who's going to be observing. I think we have to maybe look at our Petrovsky security guard profile for that. So let's move on to doing up some stat blocks.
Yeah.
And for that, I have, let's see here. Oh, here we go. I have Hero Lab open. And we're going to go ahead and stat up some guards. So under the notes, I had the types of guards we're going to look for. We don't have to set up every individual person. But we're going to have a basic guard, your typical guard you might bump into, the boss guard like the lieutenant, and then we might potentially stat out someone who's providing magical or matrix support. We're taking a look at our basic guard though from Petrovsky Security. I don't think there's a lot of lore about Petrovsky Security, but does anyone have any tidbit they'd care to share, either made up or something you know?
I have no clue about Petrovsky Security, other than that apparently they're MCT.
Okay. Oh, and we have some people suggesting animals for security. I think a mummy might not work so well. Maybe that can be the persona of the security spider. He's a mummy.
Great idea.
But bar guests also not so great in a super public area, but I think we can have dogs that come along with the guards.
Yeah.
I like that. You have dogs that come and help sniff people out when they're patrolling at night. So,
right.
I like that. But the guards themselves, I'm going to go ahead and... Oops, I'm trying to click on the OBS window instead of the actual Hero Lab window here.
You got tricked.
Oh, no. Now I'm trying to click in the Twitch stream screen. All right. Twice. All right, here we go. So hero name, Petrovsky Guard.
The Twitch stream, it's so realistic.
Player name is the GM, and this is... So when you're using Hero Lab, you can make hero PCs, but you can also do an NPC created as PC, where you've got the priorities to work with, or NPC. Or there's also Grunt NPC. I actually just normally just go with regular NPC, but so I'm just going to do that. That lets me do about whatever I want. Allegiance, enemy of party, and I'm just going to click OK, and we've got our window with our basic stuff here. So meta type, do they hire mostly humans, or should we go with something else?
I don't know. Humans are easy, but
how about orcs? Orcs are often hired for security guard work. You think they'd be common enough to be our standard guard?
Sure. I don't know anything about Egypt.
All right. Orcs. Stats, these are your basic guards, so they're not going to be terribly impressive in a lot of things. Charisma, we'll give them a 2. Logic, maybe a 2. Willpower, maybe a little bit more. Something like a 4. Makes them a little bit more of a challenge. Intuition's kind of important for perception. I think a guard might have let's give them a 4 as well. That's a little high maybe, but I'm going to go with it. Agility, their physical stats are going to be important. The bigger guys are definitely going to be, or gals will be more likely to be hired for guards. So let's give them a decent body attribute and a strength attribute. And we can't give them crappy agility and reaction, or else they won't be able to hit anything. They won't be much of a challenge. So, what do you think about that stat array?
I'm waiting for yours to catch up, and I'll be able to tell you for sure. But it looks like it's probably pretty good. I think it's caught up, and yeah. So body 8, agility 4, reaction 4, strength 7, willpower 4, logic 2, intuition 4, and charisma 2. Looks good to me.
Yeah, we'll give them an edge of 3 to represent their professional rating. They're not just goons off the street. They are hired to guard expensive artifacts. And look intimidating. So I think we can skip qualities. They're not really important to these guards. Under skills, we don't need to put in every little thing. Actually, a lot of times I'll just have a sheet of paper and I'll write down dice pools and gun skills 12, stealth 12, something like that. But in this case, we'll do a little bit more detail. Let's give them the close combat group and the firearms group.
Yeah.
They're going to need a perception skill. And what else?
Let's see. You could give them, they might have, you said perceptions already. They might have
an animal handling skill. Oh, intimidation, yes.
Yeah.
Intimidation's good. I don't think it's important whether or not they have an etiquette or a negotiation or con or anything. You can make that up on the fly if you need to, but that's not something that we normally need to worry about.
Right, exactly. So, again, think, are they going to be encountering this situation while they're on the run? Is it important that they have a computer skill or a first aid skill? Maybe not.
Computer, maybe. Considering they do have good matrix security here, the computer skill is used for matrix perception, so I could see let's give them a low computer skill, but with a specialization of matrix perception.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe that was a bad example, but yeah.
It was a good example because it's a special case to bring up you might not otherwise think about. So these guards, they're only 4 dice with computers, but 6 dice to spot if you're doing something sneaky in the matrix nearby.
Right. Actually, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So I think intimidation is going to be highly valued. Let's give them maybe a good 4 in that. Perception, also very important for them. Probably their most important skill as a guard. So let's give them a 5.
Because these guys are good at what they do.
Yeah, and then the firearms and close combat group. I'm inclined to give them 5 in those two. Maybe it's a little unrealistic to have them that skilled, but I want them to be scary if they actually have to fight the runners. And that's still not too terribly scary. And then we'll go with animal handling at like 4 as well because they work with dogs.
Yeah.
Knowledge skills, typically not important, except that we know Petrovsky is hired to do a good job on this. Let's give him a small unit tactics. We might not give him something as fancy as a PTAC network, but if we give them a bit of a small unit tactics skill, they can, do some different combat maneuvers and try some things out. Or maybe fail some combat maneuvers in front of the runners, and that can be fun for them to watch.
Yeah. And again, because these guys, remember, they've been hired and given special instructions to not cause any collateral damage. And so they might have special tactics that they use in order to control and contain and stuff like that.
All right, so augmentations, I think we're going to need some of those. These are, again, not just off-the-street guards, so they're going to have some cyber, but they're not full fancy cyber zombies, so they're not going to have the crazy stuff. I think just about any NPC is going to need some way to boost up their initiative a little bit, unless they're just there to get walked all over.
Yeah.
Let's just make it simple here and go with wired reflexes level 1. And they're orcs, so they should be tough. Maybe give them some dermal plating because it looks scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's relatively cheap. Given 3 points of that, make it a little extra tougher. More tough. Let's see. I don't think we're going to go with Cyber Eyes because they got their nice natural low light vision, and they can have any vision enhancements they need built into their equipment. Should we? How about one more piece of Bioware or Cyberware that's not super expensive from the audience?
Yeah,
while we're
that'd
waiting
be
for
good.
that, we'll move on to the armory, and we need to consider that they're not allowed to do a lot of collateral damage. So I think they're going to focus on melee weapons or precise ranged weapons. So
Yeah.
let's talk about a good precise range weapon. Data Jack, I like that. Gives them a direct neural interface, and they can cut through noise potentially some if they get jammed.
Yes. Thanks, Tiger Planet. Data Jack. Now, on the topic of weapons, you could also consider taser weapons. Would be useful.
Yes, taser weapons would be useful for not damaging the exhibits, but messing things up. So we'll go with SmartLink stuff as well, because SmartLink is fairly cheap. It can be added to the eye without being cyberware, and it's more precise than the SmartLink that's built into, say, helmets and such. So that's how I can see the argument having been made to cover that expense to corporate.
Right.
So I think that's enough cyberware for our orc. For weapons, then, we're going to go with a nice taser. Probably something with, let's see here. I think if we're looking at the tasers here, we don't have to worry too much about super high accuracy because they don't have a huge amount of dice. But good damage output would be nice. I think the Defiance EX Shocker is our best bet. What do you think, Bobby?
Yeah, it's a good old standby taser.
Now I'm going to click the Customize button for that. I guess it's not showing up on my screen on here.
It's just because it pops up in another window, but yeah, you can customize it.
So I'm going to customize it, and all I'm going to bother with the customizing is to just add an internal SmartLink system. And we're not going to go with a personalized grip because these guys stick them in recharging racks at the end of their shift.
Yeah, there you go.
But with that SmartLink, they're going to be slinging 11 dice to tase our runners if they get in the wrong way.
Right, which is challenging but not insurmountable.
And then for melee weapons, I think a stun baton is going to be perfect. So they're pretty well armed and they can beach up, but they're not super heavily dangerous. These guys aren't meant to be fighting teams of mercenaries in the hallways, but hopefully they can slow them down or deal with your typical run-of-the-mill street trash thieves. Let's see, for Matrix, we got to give him a comlink. I think it makes sense to have a rating 4 comlink. What do you think?
Yeah. Rating 4 sounds good to me.
The way they're laid out in Hero Lab, I never remember like the names of the comlinks. I'm just like, rating 4 comlink. Now, what's the basic rating 4?
It's the
Erica Elite.
There you go.
There we go. So they've got that protecting their gear and cyberware. So they would be fairly easy to hack, except for remember that they have a host running that will keep an eye on their security. So they have a firewall of 8 protecting their equipment, which is still fairly easy meat for good deckers. But I think we could plop all sorts of other stuff down here, but I think the only other stuff we need to worry about so much with our guards is their armor. And I don't think it makes sense to have guards running around in like full fancy body armor for this. I think that would scare away the people coming to take a look at the mummy exhibit.
Yeah.
I think it being Egypt is probably hot a lot, so maybe even lighter armor than you'd normally see. What do you think about just giving them armor vest and a helmet?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You make a good point about the climate. So
I don't bother customizing the armor and figuring out what points it has in this or that too much, other than I'll just assume that it has non-conductivity 5, because everyone puts that on their armor, I think, especially if they're running around with tasers.
Yeah, no kidding. The with the prevalence of stick and shock ammo in runner teams, I think it's safe to say that non-conductivity is quite a default modification.
Yeah, it could be safe to assume their helmets have things like flare compensation. But I don't think it's all that important to write all those stats. And I think these stats are as complete as we need them to be. And we can move on to the guard lieutenant.
Yeah. Now something to bring up. Well, maybe I'll wait until you're gonna if you plan on talking about magical security. I'll wait until then.
Okay, yeah, let's just go with the guard boss for now. We're gonna go with Petrovsky Lieutenant. I like the idea. Let's since we're coming close to the end of the time here, and we're talking about magical security, let's make the guard boss, the lieutenant, be their magical security boss. What do you think about that?
That sounds good to me, and it gives me the opportunity to say what I was thinking about saying. Just as a general rule, this is another trick that I learned from my co-host Cassie on the Sixth World podcast. If you are going to have potentially just in any situation where you might have security guards or something like that, or grunts, where there might be a mixture of mundane and magical people, a trick that she taught me and I use now is to just make one dude that has and we're not necessarily going to do it here, but a trick is just make one dude that has all the potential skills of all the different types that might be used ever, so that you don't have to flip between a bunch of different types of security. You know, like you've got your security guard who's uses guns and all that, but give him a spell casting and summoning and all that as well if you plan on having one or even two magical support in the security. That way it's just all of them are in one stat block, Yeah,
speaking of stat blocks, I went ahead and picked an elf and started putting some points in where it seemed like they made sense. Giving the character a little bit more weakness in the physical because they focus on their magic, but they're not total wimps. They wouldn't be allowed in as a security lieutenant with a body or a strength of 1 or 2.
Sure.
So we've got a solid agility and charisma, but not super high because they're not a face necessarily. High willpower because that makes sense for a magician. And pretty good stats overall, but nothing too crazy. For qualities, I'm actually going to toss it and give this character a positive quality just to make him or her a bit more interesting. And that's going to be, and also more challenging. And that's focus concentration at like 4.
Yeah.
So they
we'll
can have,
stand by.
Yep. We'll give them a good edge, maybe 4. I think that's one higher than we gave the goons. I want to hop over to the magic. Let's see, how do I... Oh, I have to select magic here. I think we'll just go with a full magician.
Yeah. Now, focus concentration. Yeah, focus concentration, if you guys will remember, is the quality that allows a mage to sustain a spell up
to force 4.
Yeah, up to force 4, which is really useful for a mage in a security detail because they could sustain spells that are buffing people in the group.
Okay, so I'm going to put in a perception skill. This character is also going to have, obviously intimidation is important to this, but leadership. We're going to give them the conjuring and the sorcery group. No point in putting enchanting in because they're not doing any fancy alchemy. Astral combat, maybe some of that in case that comes up. Sensing is going to be important as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Arcana, I don't have to worry about how long it takes them to initiate because we don't care. All the other social skills, yes, they're bound to have a con or an etiquette Probably some negotiation, maybe a performance, but we don't care. Same thing with maybe sneaking might be important, but I don't think this is a really stealth-based security response. They are pretty obvious, so I think we can skip all that stuff. The character might have some athletic skills, but we also probably don't. Well, maybe give them a couple of points in the athletics group to round out. There's just the fact that they're a bit physical, and then I don't have any combat skills on here, so it makes sense to put pistols down and maybe clubs. So they have some basic training that the other ones have had as well. So they know their way around a stun baton and a taser, but it's not something they're likely to go to because they have spells.
Sure. Right.
Conjuring group and the sorcery group, let's just put them at 6 because this person's good at their job. Astral combat, 6. Sensing, 6. Perception, 6. Maybe some of their secondary skills like leadership and intimidation can be at a 4, but you want to have all these skills to be good for this to be an imposing, competent enemy character. So,
right. Now, a lot of while you're filling a lot of this stuff out, a lot of things I think that are important to look at when you're picking what these numbers are, attributes and skill ratings and stuff like that, is just, again, we've said this a couple of times already, is look at what the dice pools are going to end up being, and how that compares to the group of people that you're sending into this mess, right?
Right. I'm just going here through and doing the sort of busy work of just plugging in the basic gear that the person's going to have. Same as the other guards. You might think, hey, this person might want to put on more armor or something, but that also makes them more of a target as well. If they can blend in with the rest. Of course, this is an elf amongst a bunch of orcs, so I guess they're screwed anyway. But hey, they're trying, okay? Augmentations, we'll skip that because it's magic. For spells, we don't need to know every spell the character needs. Sometimes, if I have like a really powerful magician, I'll just write down I won't even write down what spells they have. I just pick whatever spell they're going to cast at that moment. But the character like this, they may have, we know they have focused concentration, so they're going to have some spell that they probably keep sustained on themselves at all times. Or,
yeah.
That makes sense to me to be something like increased reflexes.
Yeah. To me, and this is sort of a theme that we've seen throughout the whole process here, which is first, make sure as a general rule, you're not, don't try to spend a ton of time, like all these details and everything your players aren't going to be privy to at all. So a lot of what you're doing is making it easier for you to use this NPC in the middle of running things. So if it's going to be easier for you to have some quick spells to pull from, then do it. And when I'm trying to think of what will those things be that I choose, I try to think of the flavor of the NPC, like what is
right, which is why what I've got here. I didn't put up a lot of spells, but I picked a few Mana Ball, Mana Bolt, and Power Bolt. Those are all direct combat spells that they can use to wipe out enemies without having much chance of damaging the objects around them.
Exactly, and a good increased reflexes to put on themselves or their teammates to help them be more effective.
Yeah, and leave the rest open. If this mage needs to have levitate at some point, give them levitate. If you want them to have magic fingers or to make themselves invisible, just go for it at that moment. It's not really cheating because the players have plenty of other advantages. And, okay, it's kind of cheating, but it's the okay kind of cheating.
Yeah, one thing that helped me get over the idea of whether or not, cheating or not cheating, one thought that helped me get over that was that you're trying to create a fun, challenging experience for your players. So fudging things is perfectly acceptable and pretty much expected. So, our experienced GMs in the chat listening maybe after the fact, experienced GMs are going to know that, yeah, you're going to fudge things and make stuff up on the fly. So inexperienced ones that are out there, plan for that. And by not planning too much, by not spending hours and hours and hours crafting your NPCs, just throw some stuff out there because you're going to fudge it anyway. Just give yourself a skeleton to work with.
And what I did here is I also gave our mage here a bound spirit by going to the magic tab and adding summon new spirit and adding some services. And that actually added the character to the portfolio so that when you print off your stat blocks, you don't have to go digging through the book for that stat.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
And I think now that we got the basic spells and dice pools and things down for this character, I think that's really all we need to cover for this. Feel free to give them a name. Pick them off a randomly generated list if you want. It is a good idea to give to have a few names on hand, so when your decker goes hacking through things, you have something you can pull up. But again, that's something that's easily handled by just printing off a bunch of random names or having a resource like that to hand. I think besides this, we do want to add another character to cover the dogs. We don't need to do anything too fancy. This is going to be under the critter side of things.
Right.
To be honest, I've never actually done this thing here. Heritage, race. Oh, fun. There's individual animals here. So we have a dog. Oh, and a cost of 75 nuyen. Basic stats here. And we have the dice pools all built in here. And the only reason I did that then was just basically we have the guard dog stats all built on, just like I did with that spirit. So I don't really feel the need to modify the dog other than maybe, we can give the dog some armor.
Sure. And you see Cliff is he's just putting one dog in there. There's going to be potentially multiple dogs, but there's no need you just want the stat block.
Right. Critter body armor. It's not going to let me add it here. Oh, special training required. Whatever. I'm going to put it on there anyway. That'll do for now. So we have some basic guard dog stats. We got the mage built in as the lieutenant. They've got a spirit that helps them patrol the astral space. And we're running out of time here. 2 hours is kind of short for coming up with a whole run.
Yeah. If we go over a couple of minutes, it's probably not too big of a deal.
All right, let me pull up my notes here and see what we have to do yet. Consolidate the stat blocks. We don't have any stats for the Matrix Guard. I think we don't really need to worry too much about statting out a big security spider. Let's just assume that there's a security decker. Give them a dice pool. And maybe a basic array of stats.
Yeah, and a lot of the rules that we already talked about apply. About starting with a dice pool of 12 and going up or down based on how difficult you want them to be compared to your decker or your technomancer.
Yep. So one thing I might do if I'm looking for a decker. This isn't like super high, and they're not going to be equipped with a Fairlight Excalibur. So this might be something that a starting Shadowrun decker might be able to afford to get, but isn't too terribly expensive because they might steal it, and then I have to worry about them fencing it. So if we look at something like the Novatech Navigator, it has an array of 6, 5, 4, and 3. It's a couple 100,000 nuyen. Where is that sound coming from?
Did you hear a sound? It's not
okay.
I'm not hearing it. So.
I guess Skype is doing something weird and trying to get my attention. Okay, whatever. So all we really need to do is go figure out the device rating and the attribute array. So I guess I should just do this in Hero Lab, huh? Let's just do up the decker in Hero Lab like I've been doing everything else. I'm used to doing a lot of this stuff, just like scratching out some notes on a couple of pieces of paper and being, moving on with my day. But I'm doing things a little bit more organized than I normally do here. So let's go with create new hero. And this will be the spider.
Oh, the noise you probably heard was Commander Dunsale threw a donation at us. Thanks.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to pick metatype human. Not even care about their physical stats. Let's give them 5s for all their mental stats. Skills. I'm going to look for this. A lot of times what I'm doing when I'm using a Hero Lab, it's not important like what all of their specific skills are. So I'm just grabbing a whole skill group. And we'll put it up to 6. I hit add and close that time. I should have. All right, so the skill groups that are most important for the hacking stuff is the cracking electronics groups.
Right. And they're saying that and it looks like it's true, my camera froze on the stream. Probably you want to click and Alt-Tab out of Skype or something. Sometimes it'll freeze if you leave the Skype window or something.
Okay, I think that worked. Okay, and I don't care whatever other skills. It looks like this Decker has a dice pool of 11, unless they're doing Hot Sim, which is a security spider. They probably aren't. And that's all I need for that, except for under their deck. I'm going to go Matrix Devices. I'm going to pick that Novatech Navigator. The search field is really handy to use in Hero Lab, especially when you have all the extra add-ons like me. There's tons of other stuff to scroll through. So I've got the Novatech Navigator. I'm going to close that. I don't really care what programs it's running. Actually, that is sometimes important. And I can actually modify the array here by dragging these. I think Firewall is probably almost always the highest in any configuration. Sleaze is probably the lowest for a security spider who's not trying to be sneaky. Attack is probably second most important here. So we'll do that, and I'm going to add programs to just boost up their stats a little bit.
Yeah.
So Toolbox for data processing will help their initiative a little. Encryption will help their firewall, and signal scrub for noise. Why not? Nobody likes noise.
Why not?
And there we have our Decker, or security spider. I'm going to save this portfolio, because I should have done that already. You should save off when you do stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's basically life advice all the time in this modern age.
Right?
In whatever task you're currently performing, save often.
So we've got those up there. I think that's really all the stat blocks that we're going to need. When you're running Hero Lab, you got a list of all the different stats that are stat blocks that you have in your system, and this little bullseye button will let you pick between them. I personally don't like running things off of Hero Lab as I'm running a game. I like to have stuff on paper or exported. So what I'll often do for my stat blocks is you can do an output hero stat block from the file menu, and you can output that as plain text and copy it and then paste it into some other document, such as our Google Drive doc or something. I'm not going to do that at the moment here. What I'm actually going to do is I saved this. Where did I put it? To the document Hero Lab portfolios. Okay. And I'm actually, at this point, I'm going to close. No, I'll leave Hero Lab open for now, but I'm going to put this file, a copy of this file, in the Google Drive folder that you have access to. So you can grab that, and if you have Hero Lab, you can use that to open it up, and you can tweak the numbers if you want from there. I'm not outputting the stat blocks and stats for everything because I'm nervous about copyright issues. Your Hero Lab file is already, the licensing is already done and taken care of, so I don't feel bad about sharing that. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but I like to be paranoid about legal issues like that. So,
yeah.
if you want to talk for a second while I look for this file here, I'm having trouble digging it out.
No problem. So, one thing that security, we spent a lot of time on security talking about it tonight, and that's always been a sticking point for me. In fact, I spent a lot of time one time trying to analyze the statistics of different, trying to come up with like a rule for how to stat out security. And one thing that I've learned over is not to stress too much about it. I've said it a couple times already, and the purpose of your security and your opposition is to give your runners a challenge, and to give those people who love rolling dice a chance to roll. I mean, it's there for that reason, and so a lot of it is just give yourself, like I said before, something on paper to work with that will make it so it's easy, so you don't have to think too much on the fly if you don't want to, and that you have something to fall back on to make things run more fluidly and smoothly. That's why I like to have that kind of stuff,
Yeah. I realize something that we're not going to have time to do is that that Atlantean team. So I'm going to bring up a tip on if you are short on prep time in your game mastering, just pop open that core rulebook, and there are basic stats you can pull from there for some things. What I'd recommend doing for the Atlantean team is just pick a small handful of runners out of some of the pre-gens, or maybe the helps and hindrances section, that will mirror each one of your own runners' roles for the runner team that you have for your player characters. So if there's if you have a Decker on your team, have an opposing Decker or Technomancer. If you have a mage on your team, make sure there's a mage or a shaman on the other team. If there's a street samurai, make sure there's a street samurai that maybe uses weapons in a similar way to your player character. I think that'd be a fun way to. It's almost like pitting themselves up against, like, if they were facing themselves, maybe, but nothing quite so cheesy as the dual copies of themselves popping in and.
Right. But having said that, I will admit, in a pinch, I have used the trick of just using my players' character sheets for the opposing team.
I've actually a fair number of times, for just some general unexpected combat encounter that happened somewhere, I just pulled numbers out of the air as I needed them. I didn't have anything written down until it became necessary to roll it. Then I jot down, okay, 13 dice. Oh, okay, they have a body of 5. X amount, 10 or 11 boxes, condition monitor. You don't have to be super precise. They don't know how much or how little you're actually just making up right then and there, unless you tell them, of course.
That's an important thing to always remember as a GM, especially in Shadowrun, where it can be overwhelming. And is that your job is not to at the end of the run provide them with evidence for what they just went up against. Like, your job is just to provide them with a fun experience. So sometimes that means just pulling out numbers out of the air.
A couple more details I want to hammer out on this run, though, before we adjourn, is the magical support section. Mm-hmm. We didn't really detail that out, but let's fill that out. I'm going to bring the hey, there we go. That worked. And up to that screen, we can see the document there. Looking at magical supports, how many spirits are maintained on guard? In that section there, we can type in that there is a Force 6 air spirit.
Yeah.
Are there any active personnel or critters watching astral space? No, we don't have to worry about that. The lieutenant is probably mostly busy watching physical space, but they can respond to astral threats by perceiving or projecting if they need to. So we'll just, I guess we already know about that. We don't really have to spell that out. Where are the wards and what are their ratings? I would say you're not going to have wards all over the museum in general, but places where things are kept and hidden and locked away are certainly going to have wards, and they're probably going to be fairly high. Do you think rating 6 wards for the locker rooms makes sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we'll have rating 6 wards wherever they happen to be important. I don't have to draw a map and draw where every single ward is. If there's a location that the players want to get into that they shouldn't be, there's a rating 6 ward there.
Exactly.
Any other clever magic traps or tricks, like door wards that don't tell you you've tripped them, or alchemical traps? Let's feel free to take some time to add in some little sprinkles and details like that. It might be fun to have them in there, like an alchemical trap that might set off a mana ball would be a good way to damage and deter thieves without harming the exhibits. But we'll leave it without the alchemy for now, I think.
Yeah.
But other details we missed. The other thing I want to mention, that this being a museum in a very prominent part of the city, is that you want to have that helps and hindrances section handy to dig up the stats for the high threat response guards, because if they do cause trouble and set off alarms, it's not going to take long before the cops are going to show up.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say that, again, with magical security, magical tricks and traps and everything, I think it's fair to say that again, the point there is they're not trying to trick anybody into getting nabbed by traps. They're trying to make sure that it never happens to begin with. So, at least in this particular scenario of a museum that we're talking about,
There we go, and I think we've updated the notes fairly well. I think this is a fairly complete adventure. I'm sorry we didn't get to statting out the Atlantean runners. That could have been fun, but I think 2 hours overall for our first time ever doing this. I think we've got a pretty good all-in-one complete run here. If you're going to take this and run it, I would love to hear about any results you have, any extra twists that you might have added, what you chose to use for the Atlantean Society opposing Shadowrunning team, anything like that. Certainly let us know.
That'd be a lot of fun. Because if we do something like this again, we can always, talk about it. If you want to know of an easy way to get in touch with us, there's on our website, shadowcasters.network. There's a contact form there. You can get to it, just navigate to it, or shadowcasters.network/contact.
And I just posted the link once more for the Google Drive folder, where you can get the Hero Lab file and the page of notes that we worked with writing this up. We are not delivering that any other way. You may do what you like with it, of course. We're not claiming any ownership at all over over any of the content
right.
that's included there as far as that goes, other than, hey, this was our show that you tuned into. But so feel free to take that and do what you want with it. I highly recommend, as a game master, stealing ideas wherever they happen to inspire you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get people telling me that they've stolen ideas from my actual plays and stuff all the time. And that's what I do. I steal from everyone else I listen to.
So yeah, those of you here, I want to thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us for this. It's great to have a bunch of people that were interested in checking out this show idea. Future ones, like I said, I'll probably be doing this once a month. Exactly what we'll be doing will vary from one episode to another. I think Bobby will often be assisting me with this, but we might have other different people as well.
Yeah, I might not be able to make it. This was a lot of fun for me, so I'd be totally happy to do it again. This particular kind of thing. You get a lot of people that talk about like tips and tricks and everything, but this was cool because we got to like just sit down and actually do it. Like walk through the process. So.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the GM's workshop is going to be. It's not going to be always about building a run. We might spend a whole episode designing a villain, or I don't know. I've got lots of ideas myself, but what I'm really most interested in is what you all might want to see from this. Do you want a session where we have a guest on to talk about problems in their campaign and help them come up with some potential solutions for that, or someone's going to be starting their new campaign for the first time, and we help them design some context and some elements to that world to help them get going beyond just the first run.
Yeah, there are a bunch of cool ideas we could do with this thing. This was kind of a Cliff, Mr. Johnson here came up with the idea, and as sort of an experiment, this could go in a lot of different directions. But again, the point being that we sit down and actually, get our hands dirty.
This is not talking about game mastering. This is doing the game mastering prep or the work. Putting the numbers down on the page kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have those ideas of things we can do, feedback for what you thought was cool and whatnot, send it to, like I said, shadowcasters.network/contact, and that'll go right to us, and we'll get it.
Yeah, and just to be, we haven't decided what the next show is going to be about yet, so we're really open to suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. And final, I guess, unless I don't want to jump the gun, unless there's something else that you wanted to say, Cliff. So.
No, I think we're finished here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I did want to make sure to mention again that if you guys, thanks for those of you who donated and threw us some cheers and everything. That's always like I said, it fuels our passion here. But as we're going, if you want to subscribe, that helps us out a ton to the Shadowcasters Network Twitch here. So a subscription is always helpful. At least maybe follow us so you can find out anytime we're going live. We do lots of different stuff. Mm-hmm. In fact, all week, I think almost every day this week we have streaming going on. So you can find that at shadowcasters.network/schedule, or even easier, I always forget this, the schedule is below the Twitch stream right there. You can just click on it. Yeah, so throw us a subscription and that helps us out a lot.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in. I think that concludes our stream.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I always love doing stuff like this. So thanks for showing up.
This is a lot of fun. I definitely want to do more of these.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Bye-bye.